Thank you guys. I hope you've all had a lovely break and gotten to know each other. Now it's the time for the question and answer session. I already have 2 questions planned that I want to ask you. So the first question before I open up to the floor is, you're probably inundated with ideas from various entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
What makes for you an entrepreneur stand out, and what would allow you to live the dream that they're living?
Gosh, that's a good question. I mean, it really centers around, well, look, all their ideas are good, okay? I mean, no one wakes up in the morning and has a really stupid idea that I want you to back. What they come with is a passion and a commitment to trying to do something. And so you have to sort of look through and go, which ones have the best chance of making success? And that's based on what we know. So to give an example, back in 1999, we backed 2 entrepreneurs who built a business called Fatface, which you may or not know. And when we got involved with it, it was sort of 10, 12 shops. It was run by Tim and Jules, 2 very young guys who basically liked skiing and surfing and all that sort of stuff. And what really resonated about their idea was it was already up and going, and they had something about the way they thought about the customer, which wasn't there. And again, this goes back a few years. People really, if you wanted outdoorsy type clothes, you went to M&S. And that was it. And again, of course, it's since expanded and lots of brands have come about, but Fatface was one of the very first ones. And so they spotted an idea and then went off and did it, which is important and interesting.
Yeah. Okay, my next question is, how has it been for you to do business now, what with the banker bashing and the sort of financial industry?
As I was trying to explain, I've been bashed already, so I know what it's about. I mean, we're not bankers, and we don't need particularly have bankers helping us. It's always helpful when they do, but we can invest in companies without using debt. And I mean, I think the bigger issue we have at the moment is that it's very difficult to find growth. So everyone loves the internet. And one of the things I don't think people really understand about what the internet does is it brings transparency. Yeah. Okay, if it brings transparency, what that means is it acts as a massive deflationary force in the global economy. Because suddenly, whereas if you have sort of separate markets, separate UK, separate France, separate everywhere, separate China, and it's very difficult to understand what prices are in different markets as a consumer, suddenly, if you have access to all that, because you just click at it and you know what it is, it's very difficult to compete. So what's happening is the clothes we're wearing, we're paying a lot less for. Basically, the price of clothing has been in deflation for the last 15 years. The cost of drinks, cost of this, cost of that, it's just very difficult to operate in the environment at the moment. That's a bigger issue than necessarily worrying about the bankers.
Awesome. Okay, so let's open up. Any questions you have, please raise your hand.
Okay. Hi, my name is Natalie. I have a question around product market fit, and in the absence of product market fit, do things like team dynamics come into play?
So by product market fit, you mean?
How well the product has sat in the market and how well it's growing.
Interesting. I don't think how much that plays a part in what we think. No, we always start with the team, because the team got to be able to articulate what it is about what they're doing that's important and interesting. Sorry, I'm full of stories actually, so I'll come up with another one. In 2005, 2006, we met these 2 guys who literally, this is the way they came up with their product or their business idea. They were sitting in a pub, and one of them had a bike shop. The other guy was a computer geek. And it was 1999, and Harvey, Mitch, who had the shop, said to Harvey, this website thing, can you build me one? Because I think I could sell a few bits and bobs on it. And from that little idea in the pub, they created a business that's probably #1 globally in selling bikes and bike accessories on the web. When they came to see us, what they were able to articulate was that it's a long answer to your very short question, but anyway, if you order a bicycle part, the only way back then to do it was to go into a shop, you begin the catalogue this big, and they'd say, come back in 3 weeks. Their proposition was, here is a website, and our catalogue is this big. We'll get it to you next day, and cheaper. Kind of which would you do? So it was the articulation of that that really got us excited. But beyond that, it was the fact they knew what they were doing. They just didn't know, they didn't have the wherewithal to execute it. So warehousing, infrastructure, IT, all that sort of really dull stuff we really brought to bear. Whereas they were able to sort of bring that slight magic, if I can put it that way, as to why this business would be successful.
Hi, my name's Amado. You were talking about how bankers and so on have been bashed recently, and how private equity is different from banking. I was wondering, would you support, a sort of Glass-Steagall-like law in the UK for banks?
Okay, interesting. Well, I think the problem with Glass-Steagall is the genie's out of the bottle, right? So, where to start with this question? Okay, banking, as we know it, is the most unbelievable confidence trick that we played ourselves. There is nothing there, right? It only is worth what it is because we say it's worth what it is. So any idiot, and I call them that, who says you should let the banks go bust, they're completely insane. We go back to dark ages because it's part of civilization. It's the way civilization managed to build and develop itself. That's the first point. Second point is, with this, we understand it's a confidence trick. So artificially separating it or not, it kind of doesn't really make any difference. The issue is to make it safe. And I don't think there's any system now, because when Glass-Steagall was created, it was, derivatives, futures, all sorts of stuff wasn't as it is now. And we didn't have the ability to connect the whole world. So that a little problem over here, ripples all the way through and destroys businesses, economies elsewhere. So I think we've just got to find a different way of making it work. And I don't know what the answer to that is, other than, well, let's take away some of the incentives and make it cleaner and more straightforward. So when the Bank of England is lending you money, because without that you would be bust, don't then game the interest rate system and LIBOR and cheat everyone. That's just kind of not right. And they were doing it. We know they were doing it, and they're people being taken to court on that basis. So, but then never lose sight of the fact that you can't sit there and bash banks too much, because without them, we have nothing. If you want to scare yourself, here's a scary thought. Everyone's going, house prices are too great, why don't we sort of build more houses and reduce the price of houses generally? If we did that in any big way, the banking system would collapse. Why? Because basically it's made up of mortgages. So, the problem with this stuff is it's really complex, and push over here, it comes out over there. And someone once told me, my first boss always told me, beware of the law of unintended consequences. It is very difficult to regulate and make it work. And I would say to you that the banking crisis we had in 2007, 8, 9, whatever it was, 8, really started with Bill Clinton. And actually I could go back and talk about Ronnie Reagan and Margaret Thatcher as being the real culprits in this, but no one would listen to me. But if you look at it, they really were.
Hi, I'm Monica Cummings. I just wanted to ask, why do you think London has been so successful in comparison to other cities with regards to private equity and being a hub and flushed with lots of capital? What makes the UK so unique in that sense?
I think it's because London's always been a big financial centre, so that helps, and had the infrastructure, the supporting infrastructure, so a regulatory system which people can understand, English, a language that people work with, a system of openness for business. So unfortunately, there are lots of places in Europe which purport to be open for business but really aren't, whereas the UK, it really is. The French or the Germans can't believe when we sell stuff to people that they regard as part of their national infrastructure, boats, planes, power stations. I think we're mad. And yet, that is a key part. If you're open for business, you don't mind who buys it, because that's what being open is about. You don't regulate against foreigners owning us or that. And of course, it sits in a very nice time zone. So because we invented it, I guess, Greenwich Mean Time. So we're at the centre, aren't we? But it sits in a very nice time zone and allows us to be a gateway into Europe. So I would say that we also had a jump on people. We started early. So the rest of the continent, and frankly the rest of the world after the US, learned after we did. And that's because people came from the US, parked themselves in London, or people went to business school in the US, as one or two of the founding fathers in the UK industry did, and learnt about it, then just brought it over here, and then it's gone from here, and then off it's gone. I mean, I think the more interesting question is will it sustain? And I think that's a really interesting one, because actually it's not completely clear to me. I think some of the things that people are doing, the governments are doing around taxation, around the way that we're talking about, in Europe or not in Europe, is quite scary. Because if we're not in Europe, then I just don't think we'll be successful as a country, particularly from a private equity standpoint. Make it very, very difficult to do what I do. Not least the chaos of actually, I mean, how do you get out of Europe anyway? Well, we'll see. But yeah, no, I think those factors have helped. And then you get critical mass, don't you? And suddenly London becomes an important centre, and it's very difficult to defeat that.
Essentially, there's a market which is being created. For example, in China, more people are becoming millionaires than any time in the history of the world. So the question was, if someone were to create a product which would appeal to these newfound millionaires in China, I mean, of course, the first thing is to find local expertise, but how would you go about finding these guys in the first place? Or what have you, from your experience of working with entrepreneurs, what have they done that worked?
I think you need contacts in China. I mean, it's not. I mean, China is a planned economy, right? It works because the government tells you how it works. The rule of law is driven by one state. It's a very, very complex place to do business in, and one where if you go the wrong side of people, the downside is you end up in jail and worse. So you have to have people who guide you through it. My best advice is ensure you understand and know who you're dealing with, and you're talking about a very politically. I'm trying to catch my words carefully here. Depends where this goes, but anyway, you're dealing with most millionaires in China have made money because they're politically connected, or at least were. That's an interesting group of people to be around. Let's put it that way. So I would tread very carefully and be guided into that marketplace.
My name's Ojo Sakwe.
Hi.
I've got two questions, actually. Is that
Go for
allowed?
it.
All right. So the first one, I guess, goes off of the question that Ms. Cummings asked in the back. And you started talking about sustainability. And I was wondering to what extent you're worried about inflated valuations now in the private equity space. And given the way you invest being caught in the bubble bursting, well, do you believe it's a bubble? Do you think it's going to burst? And how do you invest to ensure that you're not trapped on the wrong side of that? Then the second is more career question. It's really interesting, your background in private equity. You did Barclays, and then you've been at the same company essentially your entire career. Do you think that's made you a better or worse investor, or necessarily impacted your career in any
said you'd asked two
significant way?
questions. I didn't mean it.
That's it.
Okay. So I think the first question is around pricing and the fact that that by any measure you look at, the valuations of companies are very high, and whether we're in a bubble. So let's just think about it for a minute. So why are prices high? Let's start there. Prices are high because of QE, right? Quantitative easing, where we print money and we pump it into the economy. And what that does is it means that the returns, and again, let's not get into complexity of it, but just take my word for it, the returns investors get with interest rates so low mean they are constantly chasing risky and risky assets, looking for some sort of return. I mean, it started with the absurdity of having a situation where, for a while anyway, in fact, still in Germany, if you put money with the government, you pay them. That's just kind of crazy if you think about it. And let's ask ourselves, well, if I can't get any return, in fact, I pay people for a bond, so my money's safe, where do I get returned? Equities? Well, people have done that. And after equities, they move to property. We know what that's happened to property. And you just keep going. And you look at private equity, where if I'm thinking you're getting, let's just be generous, 1% from a bank, equities are probably getting you 6, 7%, and private equity, maybe 12. It looks quite attractive, doesn't it? And all that means is the money comes pouring in there. So that's one of the reasons why it's there. So is it a bubble? And this is an interesting one. If you look at a very, very long series of interest rates, which is really what the big issue. People go, well, they're going to rebound to normal, aren't they? Well, actually, if you look at a very long series, I mean, going back as far as you can, but one of my friends reliably does this, to sort of 1800s. Actually, between 1% and 2% is the norm. The aberrations are the Industrial Revolution, where we had massive economic growth and inflation, and the last 30 years or 40 years. That's the aberration. So actually, is it a bubble? Well, maybe not. Maybe this is the new where we are, and actually we just have to respect the fact that going back to these ridiculous Jane Austen books where people talked about, actually not ridiculous, sorry, I take that back, they're very good. But anyway, Jane Austen books, programs, I was thinking of those BBC productions which are ridiculous. That's it, I'm blaming the BBC now, I'm sorry. Anyway, those books where what happened was people talked about, if you've got to remember, I told you now, I'm telling you now, you'll remember when you see these things again. They talked about, Darcy being worth £100 a year. That's because capital had no value. It was about income. And there was no growth. Well, growth was minimal, and sometimes you went backwards and then forwards. Are we back there? You see. So it's the landscape we're in, and so is it a bubble, isn't it a bubble? Well, maybe we just accept you pay a lot more to get a minuscule income. How do you make sure you're not on the wrong side of that? Well, the way we do it is to try, despite everything, to find growth. And for us, that's about backing smaller companies that are in marketplaces where they can find the growth. So I talked about this bike accessories company. It's a company called Wiggle. And their pitch was to go, well, cycling is sort of growing a little bit, quite nice, but they were just going to take market share through better execution and a better proposition to the customer than the rest of the high street. And there's something like, back then, 50 or 60,000 small high street shops that were terrible service, expensive, and didn't even offer you whole of market product. And what Wiggle said was, I'll give you whole of market, cheaper, and get it to you next day. And that resonated and meant they could build their business very, very quickly. And so the way you get around it is by, I pay a high price, which we did, but it grew from 10 million sales to 120. So that's how you get over it. Now, you can't always find those, but that's what we look to try and do. And if you build a portfolio overall, then 15 companies over a 3 or 4 or 5 year period, if you're okay, you'll get one or two that do well. One or two wouldn't do so well, but those will pay for those. And in the middle, you've got to sort of make those work hard to return something overall. So it's a tricky one. The second question was around
your career.
My career. Now, what was the question? I kind of forgot.
So you spent the majority of your career.
Yeah, same place. Yeah, better. Actually, it made me, so several things happened. One, I stayed in the same place because, why? Well, it kind of fell apart. And so the company I was working for, I remember going on holiday one year, and funds under management is a key metric as to how we decide whether we're healthy or not as a business. And I left on holiday, and we had £150 million under management and 25 people. And this is when I was quite a junior. In fact, I'd just been made a director. I came back from holiday, and we had like 50 and about 7 people. And it took a while for that to happen, but it was disastrous. And we got taken over by someone else, and I essentially was handed the keys to drive this car called Living Bridge, or something else back then, but a predecessor firm, Living Bridge. And I just didn't know any better, right? So I was, 30, and because I was young and arrogant, I just kind of went, of course I can do this. And because I hadn't been trained anywhere else, I was making up as I was going along. And so the good news is stuff I was making up sort of worked. And again, because I had around me friends, really, who are very good friends of mine now, young people who I managed to entice into the business because they really didn't know anything either. So they learned private equity in our business. And I think if any of you if you ever ask people about Living Bridge, they'll just go, they're very different. And we are, because we haven't worked anywhere else. Which is, I don't know, better or worse? Who knows? Hi.
Hi, my name is Regina. My question is, what advice would you give to a group of master's students who came across a big idea, drew up a business plan, roadmap, strategy and everything, and have investors that want to buy the idea, but we have no passion for it, that's why we don't want to continue with it. It was an accident that we managed to, but we don't know what to do about investors.
So you want people to buy it, and you don't want to do it?
No, we were
Or-
just leaving it. So it was
So you
basically a
sell it to them?
competition that we did at Imperial that we won. And then investors have approached us since saying, oh, we'd like to either buy it or invest. And none of us are really interested. It was an accident. So we don't really know what to do now.
To the extent you can, and keep a share of it and see what happens. I mean, if you have no passion for what it is you're going to do, then don't do it.
But it's still okay to just like sell it.
Why not?
Because we were advised like, oh no, don't sell it. Try and
But if you have-
revive the passion.
So if
It
you have
was
no
like-
passion for it, and the road bumps you're going to hit in executing it mean that you have to be absolutely laser focused on your end goal. And you just won't get there. You won't stay up late at night to worry about this, that, the other. You won't turn the lights out. You won't work all hours God gives. You just won't if you're not passionate about it. And every entrepreneur I can think of who's been successful, I mean, to say they're blinkered and is an understatement. They really have focused on their idea and ensuring they can make that happen. The wonderful thing though is they have this way of post-fact, after event justification. So of course, despite the fact they changed direction without telling anyone else, that was always the direction they're going to go in that was successful. And there's some lovely stories about that, which I'm sure you all know, ranging from Google to Apple to whatever, where Google is not what it was set out to be. And they had dark days, believe me. So I would, to the extent you can do, sell it, keep a piece of it if you can, and see what someone who has a passion for doing it can do with it.
Hello all, my name is Yuri. I want to ask, there's in the PE VC world, as I've heard, there's a known formula: market, team, or people, then product. Do you believe in it? When you choosing the potential investment entrepreneur, what do you look? Do you agree with that formula? You look for the market, for the idea, then the people, then the product, or you have a slightly different vision?
Our take is we always start with people. You can, if you are in a very narrow niche, focus on the market. So, and actually usually you're venture capitalists. So this is like startup. The market's a bit more important than the people. But in the end, the people still matter. And the only way you can define the market being more important than the people is if you can create the market. And that requires really deep domain knowledge. And I don't think there's that many people who know how to do it that really well. The reason why we're focused on the sort of management first, the people first, is because the markets we're in, they exist already. So I'm relying on someone's insight as to why they turn the thing this way, why that works. So my assessment is based on that. And then I look at the people when they've got it right, look at the market, and then look at how we execute. It's kind of that's our metric. But other people do different things. It seems to work for us though.
Hi, good evening. My name is Abby. What I just wanted to ask is, what would you say has been your biggest challenge or obstacle that you've come across in your work, in your path to success, basically?
It's an easy one actually. It's fundraising. So there's a really interesting problem which we have in private equity, which is it's not really my money, which is kind of disappointing. We've got £1.5 billion under management now. But I told you we started with sort of 50. In fact, I think it was 30. And and when you're £30 million, really small business, and you're all sort of, well, I was the oldest, 30 years old. Everyone else was younger than me. And you're going out there trying to sell your capability to pension funds and insurance companies who look at you and go, well, you basically don't know what you're doing, which is kind of true, but anyway. We were lucky. We had a parent company that gave us some money, and we started to sort of work out a way of working. And that way of working, this is back in 90. Actually, you know what? I did all my best work in my 30s. I really haven't done much since then, because we came up with a sort of philosophy and approach which is about sectors. So we were saying to the marketplace, we didn't want you to share stuff. We would kind of tell you what we were looking for and go and look for it ourselves. So we really understood sectors in a deep way. We also said that rather than leaving companies alone, we want to be involved in managing them very hands-on and adding value. And we actually split ourselves into a team that did new investments, a team that did portfolio management, as it's called back then. And so when you took that to marketplace, and 99% of everyone of the market's doing something different, it didn't work. It took ages to get people to believe in what we're doing. As we did it, and as the returns came through, we didn't change actually. The market moved to where we had always been. And actually, I remember doing a presentation to an investor a few years ago, 3 or 4, 5 years ago. And I was a bit naughty because what I did was essentially use a presentation I did about 7 years earlier to the same person. And it essentially hadn't changed. I mean, some of the companies had changed, but the philosophy, how we approach life hadn't changed. And 7 years earlier, he told me it was a waste of time what I was doing. It would never work. I then presented to him this presentation, which he looked at and went, "Well, this is so fresh. This is so amazing. You know, I've always liked this stuff about you." And I went, "Chap, I did this to you 7 years ago. It's the same presentation." And he's never. And I said, "Well, here you are. It is. We haven't changed." So, but the dark days of going from sort of 30, 40, 50 million, it was tough. I mean, people didn't want to talk to us. People would sort of say, "Don't darken my doorstep." And I guess we believed in what we were doing, and we were getting success doing it. And it wasn't till probably, I don't know, 7, 8 years ago that the numbers went like that, because the joy of being on the right side of the of the fundraising coin, if you will, is that you get the opportunity to be the hot thing. And in 2012, we managed to navigate some of the crisis and get through that all right and deliver good returns. And we were trying to raise 300 million, and in the end, we had about £1 billion trying to squeeze into 300 million, and that doesn't work. I know it sounds bizarre, but you don't take the billion, you take a little bit more, but no more, because that's what we had to sell. And so there are people who I'd met earlier on who were suddenly my best friend, who I was able to say, "Well, I'm not having your money, even if you want to give it to me." So, in the end, it worked very nicely. But I would never, I mean, those were good days in the sense that I think we did some of our best work when we were really sort of trying to define why we were good and what we were doing. And, adversity makes you creative, and we were very creative. And I guess the issue is we had the confidence in ourselves to say, well, okay, it doesn't matter what the rest of the market's doing. This is how we do it, which has helped. So I don't know if I answered your questions, but hopefully it does. Not quite. What did I miss? I don't know, I was rambling, so who knows?
What I actually wanted to get from yourself is, as an individual,
Right.
without the company, without the organizations you've worked with, built up, what challenges did you face as an individual?
But you see, the trouble is, if you build a company, which I have, it is so personal, because I'm the person who's being told no, right? When I say, here's my pitch book, I'm asking you for money, without which my business doesn't survive, right? And it's a very personal thing, because they say, well, whose business is it? It's mine. What is it you're doing? What we're doing is what I created. So it's a very, very personal thing. And again, what I'm asking, what's the ask? The ask is this. I want you to give me money, okay? And this money, you have no idea what you're going to do with it. Yeah, you can look at what I've done in the past, but essentially no idea. Once you give it to me, it's gone. And I give it back to you in 10 years' time. That's what I'm asking you to do. That is really hard, right? And there's no way you're going to give it to me unless you know me. And when I say know me, I'm talking about, you know my shoe size, which is literally what they do. So it gets no more personal than that. And if you go around, as I did, the US and Europe, and you go in, you do your high energy pitch, and they shake your hand, yeah, great, lovely, and they turn around the next day and go, not for us. I mean, I was told that probably 500 times. Believe me, it's no more personal than that, right? It was challenging because you had to go back to the team base and go, no, we're doing the right thing. Just keep doing it. We'll get there in the end. That was a challenge, believe me, and it affects you very deeply because you start to question whether what I'm doing is correct or not. Does it make any sense or not? And so you look at all the things you built and go, oh, we're doing this right. And then having the courage, I guess, to say, we're going to keep doing it when the rest of the market's telling you mad. So that's why I say it was a challenge.
Thank you so much for watching. We hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and watch the rest of our talks below.